Let's have a big hooray for the final session of the evening. We have an amazing keynote speaker here today, all the way from Australia. Let's give him a big warm round of applause. Eric is here to share his unique perspective on, as you can already see up on the screen, the best job in the world. He is not only talking about the best job in the world, he is also talking about his work in Australia, where his company was actually ranked last year the 3rd best place to work in. So truly amazing. And I just learned he's also a 2-time Australian champion in cage fighting. Yeah, in case you didn't know what it is, ask him afterwards. We're so excited to have this week here. Please come on stage and give him another round warm of applause.
It's cool, we got a few people here, this is good. So just so that you guys are aware, like I said, we've come from Australia. It's about midnight-ish Australian time. So I'm running on fumes, so I'm going to give you guys as much energy as I can. It's going to help me a ton if you can give me back as much as you can as well, so if we get engaged, that'll be really, really helpful. With that in mind, can everyone do me a favor? Can you stand up for me really quickly? Oh, God. Cool. What month are we in now? Is it May, June? May. June. Okay. May or June, great. Can everyone do so if your birthday is between January and June, can you do me a favor? Can you put your hands about 6 inches apart in front of you? This is kind of cool, I'll show you. Any angle, any height, doesn't matter, right? And now, yeah, perfect, great. Now, everybody whose birthday is from July to December, can you put your hands together for me? Again, any angle, any height, doesn't really matter. And do me a favor, just smile. This is really cool. So everyone, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Wonderful. Because one thing that we've talked about in fundraising and protecting the model is covering our backside. And now, even if I do a terrible job, I can prove to the organizers you just gave me a standing ovation. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I can tell who's had a couple of beers as well. You're going to need them. This is exciting, right? So this is the first ever international face-to-face fundraising congress. This is a big deal, right? We've got streets, we've got shopping centers, we've got my personal favorite door-to-door, right? And I figured it would be a travesty if I didn't start this presentation with that in mind with a knock-knock joke. So I'm terribly sorry, I apologize ahead of time. So do we have any Germans in the room? Anyone from Germany? Wonderful. So a joke is when I say something and you laugh. Right, so we're gonna do this, right? So everyone knows how to do this? Alright, good. Knock, knock. Who's there? Woo. Woo. Okay, you guys are excited too. This is gonna be great. Look, you're already here, you might as well enjoy it. So before I really get into it, I want to address probably the question a lot of you might have, because there's a lot of really seasoned veterans here, people that have been in the industry for a long time, done some really amazing things. To paraphrase the immortal Conor McGregor, who the heck is that guy? Right? I can imagine that's what you guys a lot of you guys might be thinking, right? And you're not wrong, right? I only started a business in this industry about 5 or 6 years ago. But yes. Right, so I only started in the industry about 5 or 6 years ago. But in that time, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to learn at the feet of some of the masters in Australia. People like Danny Dimas, right? People like Ronan Hanley, Nick Spalacy, Warren, right? People that have really been titans and pioneers in the industry in Australia. And the one thing that they'll all be able to attest to is that I am really annoying. Right? And word gets it, right? So who here's got kids? Just show of hands, who's got kids? Right? Have they hit the why stage yet? Why is the sky blue? Why is that man so tall? Right? Yeah, well, I never grew out of that. and the cool thing about that is I've been very, very fortunate to be able to take what I've learned from this industry and apply it in a lot of different ways. I've been fortunate enough to write a best-selling book, predominantly from what I've learned in this industry. Been able to start a successful speaking business, which was always a big goal right? And as mentioned before, we were lucky enough to be ranked as the 3rd best place to work in Australia. This company that put to work for Australia in the Great Place to Work survey, right, where they test basically for company culture and employee satisfaction, right? And trust me, I would love to take credit for that. I'd love to take all the credit for that, but I really think that's actually quite indicative of the industry itself. Because if anybody here has set foot on the field before, or at least seen what we do, you guys all know this is the best job in the world. I think that's part of why you may be sitting here now. But I think the thing that's been frustrating for all of us is that we don't really always have a way to explain that to people. We don't have the way to articulate that so that people understand it. I saw a really good workshop before, surveying students in Austria. It was very cool. And it showed the exact same thing, is that not one of the people surveyed that hadn't been in the industry before knew that this was an amazing catalyst for growth, or that people had a real opportunity here and could progress, or that people had as much fun as we have. And so that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you guys about today, right? Is being able to articulate why this industry is so amazing, and then how to put that in our messaging so that we can get the best people out there into this industry and keep them in the industry, in order to help us all grow together. Because I don't care what side of the spectrum you sit on, if you're in the charity side, or if you're in the agency side, or if you're some random that just snuck in, right? We all benefit from better quality people coming into this industry. And I think, one of the ubiquitous problems I think we've all had, or at least that I've heard in a lot of the discussions from this conference so far, is people are struggling to find those great people. And this is what we're really going to cover today, right? So is that something that you guys would like to potentially get some value out of? Are we all in the right place now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate the engagement, right? So let's get started, right? A while ago, I came across a concept called the Pareto principle, right? Some of you may know it, some of you may not. Otherwise known as the 80-20 principle, right? And generally what it means is that 80% of your output will generally come from 20% of the input. So I'll give you an example, right? 80% of money spent on gambling is spent by 20% of gamblers. 80% of alcohol is purchased by 20% of drinkers, otherwise known as Europe. This was really good for the charities to know. 80% of your revenue will generally come from 20% of your customer base, otherwise known as your super fans, right? Your raving fans, right? And in most businesses, 80% of your sales will generally come from 20% of your sales staff. So of course that's going to translate into fundraising as well. Because although we try not to correlate or conflate sales and fundraising too much, there are some obvious parallels that we can't deny. And when I saw this and I thought about this, with my incessant curiosity and need to know, the first thing I thought was what some of you may be thinking now. Well, why can't I just build an entire team full of these guys, right? Of those top producers. And that's exactly what we set out to do. So we put together a survey, right? And essentially we tracked down, we found the best teams in Australia, because we've obviously got a pretty great network in Australia, is very developed in terms of face-to-face. A lot of people know each other. And so we reached out to as many of the best teams that we could find, and we asked them, can we please interview your top 20%? If you had 4 or 5 people in your team that you could clone today, right? Who would they be? And we interviewed those people with the survey that we put together. And there was some cool correlations, right? Some cool data correlations. Some that I'm sure you probably understand already. For instance, it was very common that most of these people, these top performers, whether they were fundraisers or fundraising managers, they came from a background of competitive sport, martial arts, or competitive dancing. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because you've got discipline, you've got stickability, you've got the ability to metabolize failure. If something goes wrong, you don't blame somebody else. You say, okay, what can I do better? And you improve from it, right? So these are all really important skills, and of course they're competitive. So that was, good to know, but nothing that was, mind-blowing. There were some things that were more loosely correlated, right? This one was interesting. We had a lot of people's father either worked in sales or owned a business, and their mother generally worked in healthcare. So they were like a nurse or a therapist, things like that, right? And that kind of makes sense too if you think about it, because you inherit your hustle from the paternal side and your compassion from the maternal side. And I don't know if anything describes this industry better than compassionate hustling, right? And so I thought that was kind of interesting, but that was kind of more loosely correlated. But there was one piece of data that just jumped off the page, right? Because we had a near 100% correlation, which I don't know if you guys have collected data or done any market research before, but that's preposterous. Right? That we had, out of the 45 people we surveyed, the best of the best, 44 of them had the exact same answer to one question. What is your biggest fear? Right? Which is a great thing to know when you're marketing, because you've got to be able to leverage with people. What is your biggest fear? Well, one person said snakes. And I hate to admit it, but she was one of mine. She was my staff. But in her defense, remember, we come from Australia. Everything is trying to kill you in Australia. Goes as well. But this is quite interesting, right? When asked, what is your biggest fear, 44 of the 45 best fundraisers or fundraising managers in Australia all said their biggest fear was not achieving what they were capable of. Not becoming the person they were capable of being. Not realizing their potential. And so that was really interesting. Because when you really think about it, we talk about what we do here and why it's so important, right? They came into this job to be able to become that, and they're clearly successful and clearly doing well and promoting doing great. So they're nailing it. So they're actually getting that delivered on as well from this industry. Does that make sense? Right? And so when we think about that, we need to understand that the part of the biggest driver of what we do here is being able to unlock people and get them to the next level. And so around the same time that we found this all out, I read an amazing book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. Just show of hands, has anyone read this before? Right. I want to say must read, it's a game changer. So they took the 11 best companies of all time, and they found, and they had some very strict criteria, right? It had to earn 30% more than market cap, had to keep the results up after changing ownership hands, which is obviously very difficult to do as well, right? And they had, I think it was 8 or 9 things that all of them had in common. And one of them in particular really jumped out at me, and it was called the hedgehog concept. Sorry, the hedgehog. Right? And so this one's kind of cool, right? So the analogy of this thing that all these top businesses did is, the analogy is, the fox is really clever. Foxes are very cunning, very clever, right? And it comes up with 1,000 ways that it tries to kill the hedgehog. But the hedgehog wins every single time, because the hedgehog doesn't do 1,000 things. The hedgehog does one thing really, really well. Turns into a little spiky ball, right? And so these top companies, they figured out what is the one thing that you can be the best in the world at, and made sure that everything their business did correlated with that hedgehog concept, right? And so if they took an opportunity to expand or find a new horizontal integration or something like that, it would run through the checklist of, is this in line with our hedgehog concept? And so I do a funny thing. Anytime I read something amazing, the first thing I do is I make all my managers read it, right? And so about a week later, I got my four guys that I have running offices. We got together and we discussed, what is our hedgehog concept? What's the thing that we can do that we can be the best in the world at? And what we came up with was we realized that because of this industry more than anything, but also we want to be able to be at the forefront of that, is that we can honestly be the best personal development avenue in the world for young people with an above average desire to be successful. And I know that sounds very lofty, right? It sounds very optimistic, because you think about, what about like Tony Robbins or Brian Tracy? But if you think about it, if you've ever been to a Tony Robbins seminar or read a Brian Tracy book, what happens? You have the 2 best weeks of your life, but then you are around all the same friends and you're doing all the same things, and 2 weeks later you're right back where you started. What we have as an industry, as a collective of what we do, and I'll explain why, is we have an engine for lasting change. We have the ability to create lasting change, right? Because in order to create lasting change, you need 3 things, right? You need a game, you need a team, and you need a scoreboard, right? A game, a team, and a scoreboard. What do I mean? Well, a game is you need goals, right? You need to have goals that are there and present right away. And I think if you think about it, when people do, they come right into a fundraising job, whether it's agency side or charity side, and right away they've got targets to hit, they've got promotions that they can get, aim at, all of these amazing things right off the bat. I think it's something like 97% of the world doesn't have meaningful goals. But the crazy part about that, if you think about it, is almost all of our, reward circuitry, our happiness circuitry, is tied to forward movement towards an aim, right? So if there's an apple tree over there and I'm hungry, every single step I take closer to that apple tree, I'm going to get more and more dopamine, get more and more of these happy chemicals. And it works, the way that it works is even funny, because if there's an obstacle, let's say there's a wall in my way, if I have to climb over this wall, I'm actually going to get even more reward chemicals on the way to the thing that I want. Which really, it kind of explains that when people, when they do their first 3 months in this industry, you notice they're just addicted to the job. And they're just totally blown away by how incredible this industry is, right? Well, that's a big component. Why? The second thing we need is a team. Well, what's a team? It's a change of environment, right? You're not hanging around those same negative friends. You're not hanging around those same lazy people. Those people that don't tell you, that don't make you feel good about yourself, right? But what else is that going to provide you? Well, number one, if you're hanging around other motivated, happy, fun people, what do you think is going to happen? Right? Everybody knows how Jones theory works, right? So that's really good, but this is the really important part. And I think this is where fundraising has an advantage over other, low-ticket sales where people get the repetitions in, right? Is because it's generally quite a judgment-free environment, right? Because when you're in an environment where you don't feel like you're going to be judged by your peers, well, you're more inclined to take chances and try new things because you're not afraid to fail. Does that make sense? You guys with me so far? Cool. The last one, this is my favorite, right, is that you've got a scoreboard, right? There's a scoreboard. This is a results-based position, which you can understand why it scares some people off, right? It's certainly, the industry is certainly not for everybody, right? If you've got crippling social anxiety and you don't like talking to strangers, you probably do something where you're not talking to people, I'm sure, right? Or at least ease yourself into something like this. But and likewise, if you're not someone who performs well when you need to achieve results, that's going to be quite tricky. But the beauty of that is that it provides accountability, right? Why does it provide accountability? Well, if you don't hit the results, it's not magic. There's no magic excuse why you didn't do it. There's something that you were supposed to do that you didn't do, right? But this is a really interesting topic. I don't know if you guys know much about brain development, but on average, it takes you about 7 repetitions of a lesson in order for the synapse to form. In order for you to really be able to grasp and remember a concept, it takes about 7 repetitions of learning, which any of the fundraising managers, you kind of understand why you have to keep repeating the same things over and over and over. This is where if I have to run another law of averages, meaning to pull my eyeballs out, right? So this is really interesting, right? Because when you combine those 3 things, it's like clockwork. If someone does 2 months in a fundraising role, we all know this. Their life is completely and unequivocally changed forever. And we just discredit that like it's not some big deal. This is a very big deal. And we talk about, okay, sure, right? Well, what kind of skills do you actually learn? Confidence, effective communication, right? Making anyone like you, dealing with difficult people and conflict, becoming a more positive person in general, right? Handling pressure, creating habits and positive discipline, resilience, accountability, gratitude. Gratitude? You learn that from a job? What do you mean, right? I'm not even done. You learn how to work effectively in a team, leadership, teaching, inspiring others, growing a team, public speaking, building a successful network, right? Because when we think about the skills, right, that we learn, well, if you don't learn these skills, if you've got a goal, and the goal highlights the skills that you need to learn in order to get there, well, if you don't learn those skills, you don't achieve that goal. For instance, if I want to get to like a leadership position where I'm running maybe 5 people, right, if I don't learn how to teach effectively, I'm never going to achieve that. If I don't understand that I need to explain why something's important to get buy-in and agreement, and I need to teach it to them in a metaphor or a story so they understand it better, and I need to maybe demonstrate it, and I need to follow up with them. If I don't learn how to do that properly, I'm not going to achieve the goal. And so you think it's, oh, that's pretty cool. It's like, think about this. In order, most of you, everyone here, you guys are reasonably successful in order to get to something like this in the first place. So you probably have a very generous mix of all of these skills. Okay, well, if somebody ransomed these skills, if they said, look, if you don't pay up, you're not going to have these skills. We're going to take these skills away from you, or habits away from you for the rest of your life. How much would you pay? $1 million? More? $5 million? Right? That's how valuable these skills actually are. And that's what we're teaching people just inherently by coming in the door. So do you guys have a better understanding now of why this job is so powerful at changing people's lives and why they enjoy it so much? Yes. I need some affirmation here. Just give me a nod. Everyone just practice here to get these neck muscles up. Right? So this is really cool. Because the problem is we now know why this is so effective, but how do we market that? How do we get that to the blue chip, high caliber prospects that we're looking for in a way that they understand it, get them in the door, and then be able to retain them? Because obviously higher caliber people have more options, right? So we've got to be able to work with that. Well, the first thing about recruitment, if you think about the psychology of getting a job, right? It's a branding effort. Recruitment is a branding effort, right? What do I mean by branding? Right? Well, branding is on a psychological level. Branding is how people display their values and status to their peers, right? And so when you think about, I'll give you an example, right? Nike. If I wear Nike, I'm telling people I value winning. If I wear Polo, I'm saying that I'm quite high class. If I wear a Rolex, that's a means of stratification, right? That I said I've reached a level that other people can't reach. Right? That's why people buy luxury products. That's why people fly first class, right? Well, think about it. Because of course this applies to employment. What are people telling other people about themselves when they work for your company? Or more specifically, what are they telling their friends and family about their values and direction, right? By saying they work for your company. And this is how we've gotten very clear on our brand messaging. Not to say that we're the be-all, end-all. I'm sure there's things that you guys will run rings around my company around. But this is what's really worked for us, and we've been able to tinker and get this to a really good level, right? Is when people say they work for us and they explain the job, what they're saying to their friends and family is that they're either going to be successful or they're part of something that helps people become successful. Do you see how this raises the status of the job and can give fresh eyes to it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Right? So how do we do that? Right? Well, the first thing is what's called a why statement. Right? So at the top of your website, at the top of any of your ads, you want to we exist, we believe, you want to be able to state right off the bat what you're about. Right? And even more than that is, I always say a picture says 1,000 words. Well, a video says 1,000 pictures. You guys do the math on that, right? And so being able to establish, maybe even in video form, right? And I'll provide an example of that. You never want to, it's always a bit of Russian roulette putting a video in a PowerPoint slide, so I don't get your hopes up. But I'll give you an example of what I mean by that, right? The other thing is, when you're interviewing, when you're in your interview process, you want to be able to ask what's called loaded questions. Because if I were to just say outright what we're about in the interview, it'd be like, oh yeah, sure, right? We're a great company, we're the best. Like, all right, haven't heard that before, right? But you put it into your question. So one that we use, this is a good example of what we use, is we say, look, one thing that's important to us to realize, if you want a winning team, you need a team full of winners. So what have you done in your life outside of work to demonstrate you're an achiever? Have you won any competitions? Notice, that's a question. But what am I saying about the business? We're a team full of winners. Who doesn't want to play for a team full of winners? The cool thing about that question as well is we get to ascertain very quickly, are they one of those people that played competitive sport, martial arts, or dance? And so this is really good. And we've actually refined this system, our recruitment system, so well now. We don't hire people if they haven't won something. I know it sounds a little bit savage, but and everyone's got their own different flavors, but this works for us because people are resilient, they're disciplined, they've got stickability, they're easily obsessed, right? Which is what you want, people that just go all in, right? And they're competitive. The other one, and this one, I think you guys are really gonna like this one. I think if you take anything away from this, you're gonna like this. If you think about, for anyone who's worked in management or recruitment or anything like that, right? If you think about the best people you've ever not been able to recruit, people that you've interviewed and they've gone and taken another job, right? The reason they've gone and taken that other job is because they wanted something with more perceived status, right? They wanted something a bit more white collar, maybe a high ticket, product or something like that, right? Well, we've actually solved that problem as well. So I got this one as a book called This Is Marketing by Seth Godin, who's like a marketing expert. And he talked about how almost all purchases are actually done with status in mind. And if you want to increase the status of what you're selling, and obviously this works in hiring and recruitment as well, there's actually only two ways you can do it effectively. It's through, one is called affiliation, and the other one is called dominion. So dominion just means that you're in charge of a group of people. That stands to reason. If you're in charge of people, it makes you more important. Affiliation is like it's being at the cool kids' table, right? Like if you saw me eating lunch with like Barack Obama out the front, you'd be like, who's this guy? He's pretty cool, right? That's what affiliation is. And so you can work this into your own pipeline or how you do it. This is how we do it, but as long as you've got the concept, you can play around with it as you like. But if we ascertain, because generally people are going to come into a job like this because they either want to be able to promote quickly, which is something we offer, or they want to be able to perform and reap the rewards of that, or be part of a fun team. Well, if we ascertain through the interview that they're somebody who wants to promote quickly, I'll say something like this, right? And I actually do it because, again, we're trying to be as indifferent as possible. I'm not trying to sell it to them, and it doesn't get more indifferent than warning someone or trying to scare them off. This is why qualifying is so effective in fundraising. When you're asking them questions up front to make sure they're suitable, it makes your product look more valuable. And it gives you better quality too, which is great, right? So if I figure out that there's somebody that wants to promote, I'll say, look, you mentioned that you were interested in promoting. Now, look, that might entail you potentially running a team of 5 to 10 people within the next 6 to 12 months. Are you sure you'd be comfortable with that level of responsibility? Yeah? Status. You get it? Right? Affiliation works this way as well. So if they're not necessarily a team building person, you'll say something like, now look, I want to be completely transparent with you, right? You're going to be working, if you are successful, you're going to be working in a team full of highly successful, highly motivated people in a competitive environment. Are you sure you'd be comfortable in that kind of atmosphere? Yeah? Status. You guys get it? Right? So this is really cool. I just wanted to give you a quick look at how we do ours. We're actually going to update ours, but this is just give you an idea of how to make this work. I don't know if the volume's going on. This industry is it's like the best kept secret. If you're having fun and you're making money, where are you going to go? Because this is a place to be. About a minute. Revolutionize an industry. We're going to do some amazing things. One way or another, it's going to happen. It's going to happen a whole hell of a lot better and a whole hell of a lot faster. And every single person in here gives everything they want. So that's it. I don't know. Okay. I wasn't doing it for the applause. I just, again, when you're teaching something, you want to be able to give a good demonstration of it, so you can sort of see how to apply it yourself. Just so that you know, though, right? Because what I'm telling you now, a lot of the things that I'm talking about now, it's not actually going to cost you much extra. You're not going to be spending much more than you already spent, right? Or doing anything more than you already do, right? That video cost to shoot and edit was about $400 Australian. Was that 200 euros, 250 euros, right? So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? And so when we get people come in for an interview, I go, hey, did you get a good idea of what we're doing? They go, yes, this is amazing. I saw the video, I really want, like, they're already engaged and fired up, wanting to come and, they don't just want a job, they want to come and work for us, right? So that's how we're sort of spreading that message. And you see the why in there, we're giving some direction and vision as well, right? There's a big celery on my, on my screen, right? So the idea is you've got to be congruent here, right? In branding of any kind of brand messaging and what you do, if you're ever incongruent or you don't, if what you say and what you do don't match, you lose that trust, and once that trust is gone, it's gone. Like when Lance Armstrong got busted doing steroids, right? You think that it's one person, and then you realize it's not. It's gone, right? And so Simon Sinek, right? He talked about this in Start With Why. I don't know if anyone's keeping a book list. I'm sorry, right? But Start With Why talks about the celery test, right? So the celery test is an interesting concept. If I tell my peers, my friends, family, whatever, that I'm a fit, healthy person, right? I care a lot about fitness. When you see me in the grocery store, at the checkout, you look in my basket, you expect to see what? Celery, vegetables, healthy food, right? And if I say that and this isn't in a judgmental way at all, this is just an example, but if I say that I'm a fit and healthy person, and then you look in my cart, in my basket, and there's ice cream and chocolate and cigarettes, right? You know I'm full of it. I'll probably have a good weekend, but you know that you can't trust what I'm saying about myself. And so we've got to be able to be congruent as an industry. And again, I want to be very clear. I don't want to tell any of you guys how to run your teams or businesses or anything like that. This is just something that, as a concept, that I think is really beneficial. So the first one I say is don't treat it like a pyramid scheme. And I know that sounds a bit abrasive, but what I mean is the model of high turnover to do your training for you is obsolete, right? The people that are leaving the business after having been, being on the field for 3 days and being told they're not good enough, they're not saying good things about what we do, right? You've got to be investing into your training. There was a couple of really good presentations on that today, which is investing in your training. And so making sure that your model is about making more with less and not less with more, right? The other thing as well, when I say that, is you can't shun people when they leave, right? If we say that we are a business that helps people become successful and learn the things they need to learn, right? Well, if they then go on to do something that they feel is more in line with their purpose, we've got to be able to accept that and celebrate that. This is a really interesting fact. But we started the business 5 years ago. In 5 years, we've had 9 people go and start their own successful business after working with us for a year or more. And which I'm incredibly proud of, and I think that's, I'm surely I'm not the only one that's experienced that, right? But the cool thing is, and I know you think it's like, oh, you've lost 9 good people. The best people I have in the business now are working with me because I told them that in the interview. So that's really, really important, right? Stepping stone stories also make good PR stories, right? And when I say PRs, I mean, a lot of times we'll get referred really good up-and-coming staff because someone that used to work with us wants to recommend them into the business. So that's really powerful for us as well. The other thing you get when you let someone leave amicably, you get boomerangs, right? It's an Australian thing, right? You throw it, it comes back, right? So when someone leaves, right, they go and get the job they think they wanted to get, and then they realize it sucks and it's not as good as fundraising, and 6 to 8 months later, they come back, only this time they're more mature and they're more grateful for the opportunity, right? You don't get that if you don't celebrate that. So that's really important. And you got to understand, this is an overall concept. Some people stay, some people go. We've got to celebrate both. Based on these lifetime bonuses I got from Nick Spalacy, who runs Fundamental. Really, really good team. Very focused on he puts a lot of pride in fundraising as a profession. And in doing that, you get a lot more quality, you get a lot more, there's benefits and you get better compliance with behavior. But what they do is when you get your 100th approved sign up, you'll get $100, right? And if you get your 500th approved sign up, you get $500, right? And you scale that to your budget. I do it where, I'm pretty generous, but you probably more than I should be, but I go to 1,000 and then every subsequent 1,000 you get another 1,000. But that's up to you. Whatever your budget and how you can make it work and what your parameters are. It doesn't even have to be financial. It can be something more like you get something that shows that you're part of that club. Maybe a certain kind of watch or a certain kind of, like necklace that you can wear in the office. It's totally up to you guys, right? Can be budget friendly. The other one though, and this one's really powerful for us, is going away speeches. When somebody leaves this industry or leaves this job, right? It's a different story if they go and work for a competitor, because obviously you've got to watch, there's going to be a grass is greener kind of complex from the team. But if they go into something else, well, you want to be able to let them talk about their experience. So we'll get everyone together in one office and let them talk about the things they've learned, their favorite memories, and give everyone a big heartfelt thank you. Does that make sense? Right, and that's, you imagine you're a new rep and you see that, that's reinforcing what we're about. Right? So that's the recruitment basics. Now, retention, right? You got to understand retention is almost always a culture issue, right? If people are having fun and they're growing and they're making money, they're not going anywhere, right? And so the retention basics, look, to be honest, I talk a lot about this kind of stuff in my book, so I'm just going to gloss over it really quickly, right? The big one though, especially if you expand, if you have multiple locations, it's very easy for the team to lose its culture because you're at the behest of the person who's managing that team. Right? Well, just like anything, you need 7 repetitions of something in order for it to stick. So I actually put the unwritten rules, the team values that we all agree on, I put them in my performance evaluations that we do monthly, right? Just an idea, right? The other one, the fun one is idiosyncrasies, right? It's those unique things that your team does. Your something rather 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, something rather, or the vernacular, the words that only you use. Right? We heard someone say halftime, we do that as well, we don't call it lunch, right? And I actually got a funny story about that one. So we had an Irish guy named Chris Goody, who actually worked for a competing team, but we're obviously quite close, so he was allowed to come and work with us for a day and help train some more new reps. He was on fire, and he goes on the forum, and in our team, when it just happened on its own, the best things always come from their own, they're organic, right? If we see someone finishing the sign up with, like a card in the hand and they're, it's towards the end, the guys will jump in our group chat and say, they smell like a sign up, right? Well, naturally, these things evolve over time, and it turned into they smell, and then it turned into they smell awful, they smell like a wet dog, and it kind of took a life of its own. And so Chris is, and he's a super cocky, handsome Irish guy, and he's finishing this sign up, and someone jumps in the chat and goes, Chris Goody smells terrible, right? And he finishes the sign up, does a really good rehash, the donor's feeling great, and he's walking down the driveway, right? And he knows that donor's on for life, so he's feeling great, right? And then he takes 3 steps, he looks at his phone, and he stops and he goes, I don't smell F you guys all smell, right? I didn't tell him till the end of the day. But that's a good idea, because every time your team expresses something exclusive that other people don't do, it creates a sense of pride in the team. Makes them proud to be part of that team. So just a good reminder, probably not something you guys don't already do, but just a good reminder, right? But if we're really talking about the blue chip people, now that we've been able to find these blue chip people, these star recruits, well, how do we keep them? So, particularly them. Well, we analyze why they leave in the first place. And it's only 3 things, right? They burn out, it gets monotonous, right? So they get bored, or they're stuck. They're stagnant, right? And so when we look at that, right, how do we fix these things? It's actually pretty easy. Well, the antidote to burnout is purpose, right? Do they have meaningful goals for themselves? But more importantly, if you do this right, do they believe in the mission of your charity or your team or your business? Because the highest performing and best performing people are the ones that buy into where you're going and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve in your cause. Does that make sense? You guys with me on that?
Yeah.
Right? The other thing as well with burnout is people need holidays. It's strenuous work. It's hard work, right? It's mentally draining. You give so much of yourself, and some days you don't get it back, right? So every 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months, send them on a holiday, especially your top performers, right? They actually did a study, right, or an experiment, and they figured out, this is fun for you guys to know as well, the perfect amount of time for a holiday is 8 days, not including travel time. So a 10-day holiday, if you can leave on like a Thursday, come back on a Sunday, right? They come fully recharged, perfect amount of time to recharge, but also stay focused, right? And I don't know, it's like, what if they're running a big team? Put the team on a road trip, they'll be fine. Make sense? The other side, when we talk about monotony, this one's really easy. Who here has seen, just show of hands, who's seen Groundhog Day, starring Bill Murray? One of my favorite movies of all time, right? For those who haven't seen it, he basically, Bill Murray, he wakes up every day and it's the same day over and over. It's like a time loop, right? Don't do that. You want to keep good people, don't let them have the same day over and over, right? No 2 days should be the same. And I know, a lot of the managers here probably do that, but if you've got expansion teams, I can almost guarantee you this is one of the things that your managers are forgetting, right? So you vary up where you're meeting, you vary up the different bonuses you do, and they don't always have to be financial. But when I say what are the plants, it's what are the plants you want to grow. If you want something to change in the office, something that you'd like to see more of, bonus that. Someone's getting a really high average age. If someone's really doing well getting 50 to 60-year-olds, you want to praise that. Or if you want more of it, you say, hey, first person to get whoever gets the most 50 to 60-year-olds this week gets a dinner with the boss at the end of the week. Do you think that's going to increase the amount of 50-year-olds you get? 100%, right? Meeting locations, we meet on turf. We live by beaches, so we'll do like meet on the beach, stuff like that. Sorry if you don't have that. Finishing early if we hit targets, and learning new skills, keeping it fresh for people. But the last one in particular I think is really interesting is stagnation, because remember, this ties us back into the concept of what we're promising people, which is that they are going to learn the skills they need to learn to maybe one day run their own business or similar, right? And so the first one is positive feedback loops. Now, so just so if you don't know, positive feedback loop is you learn something, right? It works. You're excited for that thing to work. So then you're even more excited to learn the next thing, and then you're even more excited when you work, and it's like an upward spiral. That's why another reason people in their first 3 months just fall in love with what we do. And the problem is after that first 3 months or so, people will fall off unless you keep feeding that dumbbell, right? You keep giving them things to learn, they're going to stay more energized and they're going to keep improving, right? And that's obviously to tie in with the goals. The idea of you are the keeper of the goals, right, is you keep them on track for the things they say they want, because people forget. I know it sounds crazy, but things get tough, they have a fight with their partner, whatever, all of a sudden the goal goes out the window. And so your job as a leader is to remind them, hey, how are you going towards that promotion you were going for? How are you tracking towards that saving target you had? Oh, a bit tough. Okay, well, here's, try this and stuff, right? The other one, and this one's really, really important, right? And this is tying into what we're saying, it's growth, right? You gotta make sure they're growing. And the easiest way, this is so easy, right? Every couple of weeks, just ask them, hey, have you learned anything cool, or how have you grown, right? Because if you get them reflecting, number one, you get another hit for those 7 hits that you need, right? But more importantly, they're reminding them, it's like they're re-impulsing themselves. I heard on that day, Daniel Donner did an awesome presentation, and I've forgotten her name. Who did you present with today? Yeah, she was unbelievable. And that call, right, where he hit that silent close. He goes, yeah, you up for a conversation like that? And he just shut up, right? And then he said, do you remember why you supported in the first place? And I was just like, oh my God, that's so good. And he shut up. And it took about 3 awkward seconds, and the customer goes, well, it was because of this, right? The customer re-impulsed themselves on signing up. Well, that's exactly what you're doing when you're getting them to reflect on their progress. Because if they realize that they're still leveling up, they're much less inclined to want to go anywhere else. Do you see how that affects the retention? The other thing that it does is if they can't come up with anything that you know you're not giving them enough, and it gives you an opportunity to teach them, right? The other one is, and again, everyone's got very different promotion structures, so I certainly don't want to drone on about this, but or don't have them at all. But putting the skills that people need to learn into the way you get people to progress. So I'm just going to put an example up here. It's not super important. What I want to draw attention to is, so we've got a, very similar to what UNICEF has done, we've got a fully online sales training video platform, and in order to get that promotion, they have to finish that platform. This is where it gets really exciting. They then have to pass a written exam on those skills to demonstrate they know them. Then they've got to hit a criteria, right? And the reason for that, the reason for the exam is because we got stuck at about 30 staff for, obviously COVID didn't help, but we got stuck at about 30 staff for quite a long time. And we realized the problem was that there was too much being lost in translation for the leadership education, being lost in Chinese whispers. And so we systemized it. So we put, we had manuals, we had all that stuff, and they have to demonstrate that they know it to the fullest extent. They have to pass with 90% in order to get that promotion, right? The other thing that I think you guys might find really interesting here is we make them read a book for every promotion as well. Right? Because for a lot of you, if you're a reader, you know how good reading is. And what better way to encourage your staff to read than to force them to do it against their will? Right? So this is really beneficial for us, but don't overthink it. And look, I'll be around for the next day or two. If you want to go more in depth on this kind of stuff, I'm always up for a chat. I love connecting, that kind of stuff. I'm a peacock, right? I'll wrap this up in a second, right? But I just want to let you guys know, because I love this industry, and I just want to add as much value to it as I can. We've got about 100 little information cards on us. You just chuck your email in and give it back to Corey. So Corey will be standing here to take it for you. Just got some cool stuff in there that we can email you out. The cool one that I like most is the Peak Performance Playbook. We did a lot of study on the neuroscience behind accessing and sustaining peak performance windows and then applying that to fundraising, so that one's pretty cool. A few other things, I've got my interview script I'm more than happy to share with you. There's a couple of cool ebooks and stuff. If you guys, because I know that this is a very conference-heavy industry, and I know you guys like accessing extra training. I love helping rev up and level up fundraisers. I love being able to take leaders to the next level to run and scale bigger teams. And I also do a seminar on, or a keynote on, more of the nitty-gritty of recruitment, retention, and scaling. Because scaling is pretty tough as well, right? So that's something that I'd love to be able to help you guys as well if you ever need it. Normally I keep a big stack of my books here as well, but we're going to Santorini after this, and the last thing I want to do is lug books around on the beach, right? So if anyone wants a copy, go for it, but no pressure at all. I just thought it off for that if anyone needed it. But let me wrap this thing up, right? So, you want to go back? Sorry. Oh, shucks. Thanks, everyone. You let me know when you're good. So, what I'd love you to do, right, because I know I've given you a lot of information and I talked about the value of reflection here, right? I want you to think if there's one or two things that you've learned from this that you are actually just itching to tinker with or try or put into your system, just imagine that for a second, let it cement, right? But beyond the value of the content here, right? Has this been of value to you guys? Have you guys got something out of this? Yeah, thumbs up, I think. Right. Beyond the value, sorry, my mic's dead. Right, beyond the value of what you're learning, individually, sorry, I got a loud voice. There we go, right? Give her a round of applause, what a woman. For the charities, so the people working on the charity side, right? More than anything, what I want you to understand is you're not just investing in your own ROI. You're not just investing in your own bottom line when you enable fundraising. Everything good I have in my life, I owe to this industry. And none of that happens without you guys. And so I want you to understand that you're allowing something really special to happen for those fundraisers and those teams that you select. And when you're selecting teams to work with, if you are outsourcing to agencies, make sure you look into how they train their staff. because that's the best part of this industry. And if we want to grow this industry, then that's how we're going to be focusing, right? If there are any fundraisers in the room, I just hope you're excited to achieve your potential, to use this catalyst to become the person you're capable of becoming, right? And anyone on the management or agency owners, right? Obviously, there's some practical things here, but more than anything, I hope that you fall back in love with the best part of this job, which is what you can do for the people who trust you to lead them. And it never stops being great. It never stops being a great feeling what you can do for your people. I've got a very clear vision of what I want to achieve. Right? I love this industry so much. I mean, you can tell I exude it, right? And I see it crystal clear that across the Western world, if we do this right, then before, during, after, or preferably instead of studying business, people do 6 to 12 months of face-to-face fundraising. Right? But really imagine what your life or your business or your job would look like if people were lining up around the corner to do this the way they do for law or medicine or things like that. I've imagined that so many times it feels like a memory, right? And the cool part about that is it's not something I have to do alone, right? We're not competitors here, we're on the same team. I'm not trying to get a bigger slice of the pie. I want to make this pie bigger for all of us. And the cool part about that is we know how to do it. You put integrity, you put sustainability, and you put the growth and well-being of your fundraisers at the forefront of what you do, we can't lose. I'm Barrett Kennett, and this is the best job in the world.